In this video, we are going to talk about discovery and design thinking. Basically, a way to de-risk your investments. So let's start with a couple questions. What do we mean by discovery? How do you do discovery, and why do discovery? So what do we mean by discovery is these are some of the techniques that you can use to validate your idea, or it actually helps you work on the right things. The techniques like prototyping or wireframing or interviewing your customers to learn about them. These are all different techniques to learn about your problem space and also about your solution space. So how to do it? Well, there are basically you can categorize the steps into three categories. The first one is around understanding our users and their needs, which is basically understanding the problem space. So in this step, we learn more about our users, what is their context, what are their problems, what do they need, what can help them. So that's the first step. The second one is to come up with potential solutions. And so that's the ideate, where we generate lots of ideas. And then the third one is that we validate whatever ideas we have or solutions that we have. And you can, if you already have an idea, you can just do the step number 3. If you don't have an idea, if you understand your users, then you can start with the ideate and then you can validate. So why do you do discovery? Well, it converts failures into learnings. A lot of organizations have this issue where somebody comes up with an idea, and it might be due to they have seen a competitor do it, or they just think like, oh, this will solve the problem, and they are very optimistic about their idea, and they feel like it's definitely going to help because it helps someone else. But context matters, and context might be different, and frequently that idea gets into implementation pipeline, and they spend like 3 years implementing this idea, and many number of times that idea does not help, or sometimes it's totally a disaster, or sometimes at least it's a partial success. So nowadays people call failures learning, like, oh, okay, that's fine, it did not work, but but we learned. But I think there is a big difference between failure and learning, and in my mind that's cost, which is like how much do you invest to learn. And if the cost was too high, I would call it a failure. So for example, if for a small thing, if you spend $5 million, then it's a failure. Whereas if you spend, let's say, $200,000 to just learn about a mega project, or $10 million project that you're about to start, and you learn that it is not a good solution, then I would call it a learning. So that's one. But frequently leaders or others, they generally tell me like, oh, we don't have time for this, we need to implement. And I tell them like, do you want to de-risk your investment? And this kind of, because a lot of executives and leaders, they do deal with investment and what to invest, where to prioritize, I think this might resonate with them. So you can ask them, like, these discovery techniques actually help you de-risk your investment. And discovery is in our everyday life. For example, let's say we want to move away from Minnesota, from a winter place to somewhere warm. So a lot of time what we will do is that we won't just move, we'll say, okay, we're just going to take a temporary 1 month, we're going to stay at this new location and see how we feel, and see if this is the right solution. And we invest a little bit, and then if we like it, then we actually make a move on our job, and then we relocate our family. Similarly, I have heard that you get a pet before you become a parent, just to get used to taking care of someone, right? So there are lots of such examples in our everyday life where we invest a little bit to learn if we are solving the right problem or the solution that we are thinking is the right solution. Now, there are a lot of frameworks that use this concept of discovery, and here are some that we will cover. The first one is design thinking. So it kind of combines all those three steps in, all those three categories of discovery. And then design sprint is based on design thinking, but it's a 5-day process where teams basically go with intense steps. Within 5 days, they validate the idea, they learn about their users and everything. And then finally, the lean startup concept that basically focuses on validating your solution. So let's talk about each one of them. So design thinking, what is it, how to apply, where can you apply it? So design thinking is a process for creative problem solving. Interestingly, it is not just for software development, it's for any problem solving. You can apply it for a process flow also. It's also called, or it's also defined as methodology for creative and practical wicked problem solving. This is what the Tim Brown says, CEO of IDEO, where the design thinking concept was born. So design thinking is a human-centered approach to innovation that draws from Designer's Toolkit to integrate the needs of people, the possibility of technology, and requirement for business success. So basically what they're saying is it's an intersection of desirability, feasibility, which is technical, and viability means will it survive as a business idea. And it takes care of all three things together as part of that process. So let's go through what are the steps of design thinking. So the first step is to empathize, which is to develop a deep understanding of the challenge, which is the problem. And then and this is where you kind of, opens up. And the next step is to go to define, which is to pick what is the problem that you're actually going to solve in this cycle of design thinking. And then you ideate, means you come up with lots and lots of ideas, and then you prototype, and you may have to do multiple prototypes, but you create a prototype that allows you to validate your idea, and then finally you test your prototype with certain users to see if what you anticipated actually happened, or what do you want to learn, right? What you learn from it. Now, even though this shows like a sequence of empathize, define, ideate, prototype, test, it's not really a one flow process. Sometimes, when you're defining or when you're ideating, you go back to empathize again because you want to learn, or maybe when you ideate, you say this is not the right problem to solve, and so you go back to define. Sometimes when you're doing prototype, then you go to different. So I think it's like you have to go back and forth to to really make your process effective, and it's okay to go back and forth. So one thing you will notice is something that is happening in this design thinking process is we start with empathy or learning about the user. So we are really opening up, like we are diverging, we are adding lots and lots of, we are opening up to learn what are the different problems that could be solved. And then you go to the define step where we really pick one of those problems to solve. So we are converging into one. And once we do that, then that's what is the problem definition. We have a problem that we need to solve. And then we again go into ideate step where we come up with lots of ideas. So again, we are doing a divergent. And then finally, we pick the prototype and validate, like what is the solution that actually resonates with the users. So this is also called the double diamond. You're going to hear this term in the industry called double diamond. So design thinking, kind of follows this process. So where can you apply design thinking? Well, design thinking you can apply at there are lots and lots of techniques, as you will see in each of these steps, empathy and all of that stuff. So you can potentially apply any of these steps anywhere, right? Now, design sprint, like I said, is 100% based on design thinking process. So we're going to learn a little bit more about it. It's a very condensed version of design sprint. And then last one is apply some of the steps. For example, the lean startup only focuses on prototyping and testing. So we're going to give a quick overview of design sprint. So like I said, it's a week-long process, the very much condensed version of design thinking. Now there is another version of design sprint which finishes in 4 days. So really, sometimes when we say, okay, we need to do discovery, we think about like, oh, it's going to take 3 months or 2 months or whatever. But they have this design sprint is so well-defined process. If you have your users available to you, if you have the right team members, you can pretty much do the whole design thinking process, one cycle of it within a week. So it's a very well-defined agenda and well-defined activities for each of the day. And so it starts with a map where you map like what is the process of user using the product. Then you come up with lots of different ideas on Tuesday, which is the sketch. On Wednesday, you decide which one you're going to prototype, and then Thursday you prototype, and then Friday you actually test. So in 5 days, you finish your whole cycle. So the last concept we're going to learn about is the lean startup, which is Eric Ries, based on Eric Ries' book. And so basically he's talking about the cycle of learn, build, and measure. And so one of the questions people ask is, what should I build so that I can measure and then I can learn? And so to know what to build or what experiment to do, you start with an assumption. So you identify what are the different assumptions about your solutions that you're assuming, right? And then to validate those assumptions, you say, what metric would I measure to validate whether my assumption is correct or not? And then based on that metric that you want to measure, you actually create an experiment that allows you to measure that metric. And then you complete this loop as quickly as possible. So the experiment has to be really kind of small experiments. And then you can do the same cycle again and again.